Alchemy Radio. Alchemy Radio. Alchemy Radio. Analyze. Conceive. Believe. Are you tuned in?
Hello and welcome to Alchemy Radio, where the only thing we ask of you is that you keep an open mind. Today's first guest is Gerald Celente. Gerald was born in the Bronx in New York, and he had early political experience running a mayoral campaign in Yonkers, New York, and served as executive assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate, which Celente called the worst job he ever had. From 1973 to 1979, Celente travelled between Chicago and Washington, D.C. as a government affairs specialist. In 1980, Celente founded the Trends Research Institute, at first called the Socioeconomic Research Institute of America, now located in Kingston, New York, publisher of the Trends Journal, which forecasts and analyses business, socioeconomic, political and other trends. Celente has described himself as a political atheist and citizen of the world. Gerald, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me, John.
Fantastic to have you on the show. Really excited about the chat we're going to have. And I suppose let's get straight to the thick of the action. One thing I would like to talk to you about is Europe. What the hell is going on, Gerald, at the moment in Europe? I mean, you've been predicting trends for so long and they seem to be so accurate. What's happening?
Well, it's the same thing that's happening in the United States, same thing that's happening in China, and that's a lot of cheap money flowed into the markets, created bubbles. Now the bubbles have burst, and they're trying to fix them. And the way they try to fix them is they have this white shoe boy language. Over there they call it austerity measures. Over here we call it too big to fail. So what they do is they steal the people's money, and they give it to the banks. Because the banks made bad bets. And hey, banks can't make bad bets, because if banks made bad bets and they start losing money and have to close down, then the whole world ends. That's the fairy tale. So it doesn't end. Nothing happens. These are a bunch of money junkies that don't like losing. They're gamblers. And they're gamblers with a bad attitude. So they want their money. I want my money. I made a bad bet. Screw you. I'm going to steal from you what you have. But we'll put a name on it. As I said, austerity measures. That means we'll cut your pensions, raise taxes, increase your retirement age till after you die, and anything else we could squeeze out of you. Raise VAT taxes. We'll make up new things like water taxes. We'll make up anything we can to squeeze every penny out of you. So that's what's going on. And it's the same thing worldwide. In the United States, they call it too big to fail. Too big to fail? Who made that one up? This is supposed to be the thoroughbred of capitalism. In capitalism, you rise and fall on your own merits. Hey, wait a minute. Not us. Oh, you know who we are? We're the bankers. There's a picture on one of our Spring Trends journals, the cover. And it shows Jesus Christ beating the money changers out of the temple. Mm-hmm. But the money changers are now Goldman Sachs gang, Dexia, Bankia, and all these guys dressed up in those, with those blue and white ties on, running out. Think about it, John. The only time that the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, becomes violent, is when he picks up a whip to drive the money changers out of the temple. Hey, wonder why? And the same thing is going on now. It's the money changers. There is a new world order. It's the banking order. And it's being centralized. I mentioned China. China right now, they're dumping stimulus in there. They have the housing bubble has collapsed, the building bubble. They're lowering interest rates. They're trying everything they can to keep this thing afloat. So the entire global economy is under collapse. As a matter of fact, the IMF, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's the International Mafia Federation. What they've done now is they've come out with a report just a few days ago saying how bad things are. Oh, son of a gun, blow me over. Would have never known. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, no kidding. There's no solving it. The only way they're solving it is they're going to take us to war. That's the way they do it all the time.
And that's something I wanted to talk to you about, Gerald, because it does seem like the drums of war are beating with regard to the Middle East. Iran Israel, you've the US, you've China and Russia, and they all seem to be starting to kind of consolidate and take sides. And I suppose when you look at the economic situation globally, oil, etc., it all comes down to one thing: power and control. And is there any way that we're not going to face massive war in the Middle East the way things are right now? I mean, I see echoes of what happened before, for example, look at Weimar Germany and how Hitler came to power and what happened after that. I mean, is history repeating itself here?
You don't need Hitler to come to power. You had Bush and Cheney and Blair. I mean, you want to talk about warmongers? How about the beauties that they start? Mm-hmm. You got them going on now. How about that lovely Nobel Peace Prize winner, Obama? You know, how about that one, starting a war with that little chicken hawk over there, Cameron, and Sarkozy, who's gone now, against Libya. What did Libya do? I'll tell you what Libya did. They were sitting on some of those most precious sweet crude oil on the planet. What do you think they went into Iraq for? Because of their broccoli crop? You think they'd care if Iraq wasn't sitting on the world's second largest oil reserves? So, you know, it's just different, but it's all the same. It's about money. You left the money out of the power. That's about all it is. These are psychopaths, and all they are front men for the mafia, and the mafia, the money men, the military-industrial complex. You know, on and on. Look what's going on. Talking about atrocities. Look what they've done to Iran. They've committed war against Iran. They just call it a different name. We'll call it sanctions. We'll freeze them out. They can't sell or buy anything, basically. And so what does that do? What did Iran do? Oh, Iran might get a nuclear bomb, son of a gun. Hey, how many does the U.S. have? About 10,000. France, India, Pakistan. Who else? China, Russia. Oh, North Korea. Oh, how about Israel? Mm-hmm. Well, there we go. Wait a minute. We're not allowed to talk about Israel's 400 alleged nuclear bombs. I mean, who's kidding whom? You know, so what is it? You think about it. Why do they hate Iran? Because in 1953, the democratically elected government of Iran was overthrown, Mossadegh government, because he had the nerve to nationalize their oil fields. That's right. Threw out BP, which was then Anglo-Iranian, and Standard Oil, which is now ExxonMobil. And so they overthrew the government, put in the dictator, the Shah. I mean, that's all this is about. It's about oil. You think anybody care about... They care as much about Iran as they care about Somalia, if it weren't sitting on all that oil. That's all this is about.
And we're at the coalface of it here in Ireland with regard to economic meltdown, but you hear the constant cry of the media and politicians that, oh, things are going to get better and you can always replace us because it's that great word, a democracy. But I mean, you've spoken in your most recent journal about Einstein's theory of relative insanity, whereby definition nearly of insanity is that people do the same thing over and over again and they expect different results. So politicians voting, Gerald, talk to me about that. It's pointless, is it?
It's pointless. It's like voting for the Gambinos or the Bananas, the Democrats or the Republicans, whatever names of your parties there. You know, just a little background. I began my career many years ago running political campaigns in Westchester County in New York. It's the richest county in the United States. In those days, back in the 70s, quite affluent. And then I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. And I was also down in D.C. for several years as a government affairs specialist. And one of our chief writers in the Trends Journal is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. So we're guys that know what it looks like. You know who these guys are that call themselves senators, prime ministers, or chancellors, or congressmen, or whatever they want to... These are the same people you hated in high school that were the brown-nosers, suck-ups, glad-handers, that wanted to be class president or went to college, head of the student council. That's all they are. These guys are born on, Easy Street, and they try to make it as though, they're Main Street cats. Their daddy knew this or their father was that. And it is all this is. It's a club. It's Harvard, Princeton, Yale, bullets, bombs, and banks. So, to me, I'm not voting for a lesser of two evils. And I do not go out with lesser of two evils. I don't associate them. I don't do business with them. Why would I why would I vote for one? Lesser or greater. It's evil. And when you vote for them, the insanity is to expect different results, knowing that you're putting in the same power-hungry losers and that destroy your nation. What is it in the human spirit that allows people to do this? And not only do they do it, they wait online and clap and applaud, bow down and suck up. Can't wait to get an autograph. Guy put the arm around you. Hey, kiss my baby. Hey, how about kissing this?
Well, exactly, and we see the US gearing up for another presidential election. It seems over here in Europe, the only thing we hear about the US is maybe lip service to the latest war or blanket coverage of the US presidential election. So you've got Romney, you've got Obama, and they are two sides of the same coin. There's no doubt about that, surely.
Oh, they are, precisely. I mean, they just perform differently. One tap dance is better than the other. It's the presidential reality show. By their deeds you shall know them. I just went through a bunch of Obama stuff. I could give you more. Here's some more. How about he signed in New Year's Eve the National Defense Authorization Act? That's right, that great liberal. I don't know who you are. You know that? They could say, I could right now, the doors could come bashing down on my building, and they could say I'm in contact with a terrorist. That's right. How do I know you're not a terrorist? They say they are. What proof do I need? None. You know why, John? Because I have no charges against me. They don't need any. I don't get a lawyer. I don't get a judge. I don't get a jury. I don't get a trial. John Gibbons is a terrorist. What do you mean? What are you talking about? No, he's a terrorist. You had association with a terrorist. Jack, you're dead. That's right. That's the National Defense Authorization Act that Obama signed. And also, you keep going down the list. He wasn't going to keep those Bush tax cuts going. Oh, yes, he did. Oh, he was going to reverse the Patriot Act that robs our constitutional rights. Nope, he upped it. Oh, I got another one for you. How about sending some more troops over into Afghanistan to kill other people and to get killed? There's a real liberal for you. No, it's the same deal. It's the same guys. It's as I said, the Gambinos are the Bananos. And people better grow up. You don't have a representative form of government. They don't represent you. They represent the people that give them money. That's it. End of story.
And even that point is salient because it's quite transparent. All you have to do is look at the published lists of donators to these presidential campaigns, and that tells the story in itself. Exactly.
But again, people are blinded. They believe in their ideology. And as I said, I'm a political atheist. I don't believe in anybody's political religion. Give me a break, man.
Yeah.
Cool it out. Don't tell me I have to believe in your jive. And I certainly don't bow to political gods. And I won't vote for one. And I do believe in God. And the God that I believe would call it a sin if I cast my vote for an evil, lesser or greater.
So, to a solution, Gerald. What are people meant to do? Because I can hear people shouting at their radios or their computers or whatever right now, and they're saying, right, well, we're doomed. We're looking down the abyss. What are we meant to do if we can't trust politicians? So have you any proposed solutions so that people can empower themselves as opposed to relying on the structures that are already in place that we know are actually enslaving us?
Yes. Send $39.95 to Solutions. I'm only kidding. Direct democracy is one of them, and you have a movement going on there in Ireland.
That's right.
That's pushing for it. That's to me is the prime one. Not the prime one, one of the big ones. Switzerland does it. There's 7 million people. Or 11 million. It doesn't make a difference how many people there. You vote on issues. You want to go to war? Let's vote. You want to vote to put a tax on your water bill? Let's vote on it. You want to vote to put more VAT taxes? Let's vote on it. I don't need some little slimy politician to tell me what I should do, just to get it straight. So, let us vote. Let the people vote. You want to call it democracy? Let's call it a democracy. Let the people vote. If we could bank online, we could vote online. That's right. You can move trillions of dollars worth of dough around the world by the seconds. Certainly, we could have a pretty good system to keep our votes secure. And it'd be all transparent. And with all the, the techno geeks out there, be sure it's a legitimate system, unlike the illegitimate systems they have now. Number two, and this is the big one. Everybody has to look within themselves. Am I the best person that I can be? If I use the gifts that only I have, the unique gifts, to bring them to higher levels and keep rising to higher levels. You hear the sirens?
I can. They're coming for you. They're coming for you already.
I guess you are that terrorist. Yeah. Anyway, you have to bring yourself, and if you bring yourself to higher levels of, in my belief, and again, my motto, taught to me by my dear father, may his soul rest in peace, is think for yourself. I don't tell anybody what to believe. This is the way I see it. So the way I see it is that when you have courage and dignity and respect and integrity and passion, you don't take anybody's crap because you know who you are and you keep trying to be better at who you are. Mm-hmm. And so you don't succumb to these little weasels that are called politicians. And you demand that they rise to a higher level as well. And we've all sunk into a lower one, from the junk we eat to the junk we listen to the junk we read, to the junk we watch. Junk in, junk out. So I believe there's time for a renaissance. There was one before. It happened following the Black Plague. People realized that what they were doing to themselves was destructive, and the people that survived were the ones who were living the higher life. They were out in monasteries and convents, eating clean, living cleaner lives. And I'm not a monastery or convent guy. I want to make that really clear. But what I meant is they got away from the filth and the slime of the cities and the destruction around them. And they brought a higher level. They looked back, and they used to say at the height of the Renaissance, "Ali Romana e alla Antica" in Italy, in Florence, to describe the quality of their work. And look at the work we put out now. Look at the crap. They call McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. They call that food and coffee. It's crap. So the thing is, support your local. Do as much as you can locally. Buy local. Be local. Build your community. But it starts with the individual. There's that wonderful Hindu saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Anybody that's practiced at anything knows what I'm talking about. I mean, to get good at anything, you got to practice every day, all the time. And a good friend of mine, Sonny Rollins, famous saxophone player, he's in his 80s, greatest living saxophone player, and from the old school. He practices every day. I believe that when the people are ready, the leaders will appear. But they have to practice. And the leader's not ready to show up because the people wouldn't know if it was there. So that's what I believe the change could come from.
And I have to say, I fully subscribe to that view. I think it really is about the power of the individual, and we have that within us. As long as we're willing to actually make that move and stop granting our power to the powers that be, because we are the ones who should be in control of our own destinies, be it financial, be it in terms of food, be it in terms of what we watch or listen to use your examples.
Of course. And again, Ireland, Catholic Ireland, my God. The teachings of Jesus. What could be more than, closer than that? Wouldn't Christ want you to be the best that you can be? Wasn't that what Catholicism is really about, and the foundation of it, is to live to the highest level of the potential of the human being? Not to follow. Not in the catechism, man. That ain't part of the deal. Follow your leader? Hey, follow this. What, are you kidding? I wouldn't follow these cats across the street. If you want to talk to me, they could come over here. We could have a conversation. I'm not following. Leader? Lead what? Lead you into destruction. You come into this world alone and you leave it alone. And to me, speaking only for myself, I want to leave it on a high note, knowing I'm the person who I said I was and did what I believed I would do.
So, Gerald, do you think that in the short term and medium term that the outlook is good, or is it bad? Because we've spoken about the solutions. Do you think that people are ready to actually act on that yet?
It's up to the individual. I can't speak for other people. A renaissance could happen in a blink of an eye. It could be an awakening. When enough people awake internally, it all changes. When enough people change, the society changes. So, of course, something has to happen quickly. And, it's a time to me for radical solutions. And I don't mean radical in a negative way. I mean radical in the terms that I was in an earthquake in Chile, 8.8 earthquake, the worst earthquake on record. Back in 2010, I was on the 14th floor of the Crown Plaza Hotel. As soon as I felt the first rattling, as with my buddy, I was out of bed, man. And then he said to me, "Did you feel that?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He said, "It was just a little, tremor." He said, "It's over now." And I hate people telling me what is,
Yeah.
The place started letting loose seconds later. And I ran down 14 flights of stairs best I could. It's the building swaying and things breaking and falling. And I kept thinking as I'm running down the stairs, what's going to happen is all these other people from 14 flights below start coming out. How am I going to get around them? I want to get out of here. I went down 14 flights of stairs. There was not one person in front of me.
Incredible.
Everybody froze.
Incredible.
So the point being is that there's time for moderate decisions, and there's time to act in a critical situation. And there's a critical situation. It doesn't take moderation. It takes a reverse course, changing course. We can see the danger in front of us, and we're heading to it. Being a trend forecaster is like being in the catbird seat, in a ship. You're looking ahead, and you see it in front of you, and you say, we have to change course. And that's the way we see it. So right now, we think it's time for dramatic shifts to take place in order to save the future.
Gerald Celente, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll see you in Dublin on the 6th of November in the Gibson Hotel at the Point Village in Dublin 1 beside the O2. Doors are at 6:30pm. The event kicks off at 7 o'clock with an introduction from Aidan Killian, one of Ireland's hottest comedians at the moment, and Stefan Kramer, who will be talking about why buy gold and gold price manipulation. And of course yourself then speaking about latest trends, banking scams and direct democracy. That's Dublin, November the 6th in association with One World Chronicle and Celtic Gold. For more details on the event, people can log on to oneworldchronicle.com. Thank you very much for joining me on Alchemy Radio. I have the power, you have the power, we have the power. Gerald Celente, it's been a huge pleasure.
Thank you very much, John. Bye-bye now.
Alchemy Radio.
Alchemy Radio.
You get up. Alchemy Radio.
Alchemy Radio.
And our second guest today on Alchemy Radio is Barry Fitzgerald from Ireland. Barry is the author of Building Cities of Gold, in which he examines society and corporatocracy and offers some solutions for how we might break free from some of the major problems that we are currently experiencing in Ireland and globally. Barry has also recently produced a video called From Tyranny To Freedom, which is available on YouTube. It's a half-hour video which looks at currency and the financial control system and again offers real-life tangible solutions as to how we might proceed in a world without the ties of our current monetary system. So, hey Barry, how are you?
Not too bad, John. It's great to be here. I'm delighted to be invited on to get the chance to speak about this video and book. So thanks very much for that.
You're most welcome. So tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from.
I trained as an engineer in electrical engineering in Cork. I'm from Cork and went from there to work in the multinationals in Dublin, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, etc. And, I suppose at a young age, 22 or 23, first year into a career, I kind of suddenly realised that this corporate lark didn't really suit at all, actually, and I didn't want to go up this path. It was a good job, making nice money at the time. I suppose you're young and, it should be, the world is your oyster and go for it, but it just didn't feel right, and I suppose that kind of put me on a journey then of kind of questioning, well, what is right for you and what do you want to do? And I suppose a lot of people who ask that question day one don't realise the kind of worms they're opening, and 10 years can pass and you're still figuring all that out. And I suppose that's basically what happened. Literally 10 years passed, a lot of questioning, a lot of journeying, a lot of trying to figure out, I suppose. I suppose I always had this yearning to do something that mattered. No, not something that mattered in the sense of being famous, but something that mattered to me.
Yeah.
And that was it. Why am I here and what am I supposed to do and will I get there? And just constantly pushing and pushing for that. And I suppose in a way you push too hard and you don't you forget to enjoy life as it's happening. But anyway, that was it. I went on that journey, and that brought me up, I suppose, starting from 96, 97, and that brought me up to the middle of the decade just gone there, maybe 2004, 2005, around which time I got married, actually. And my wife Orla and myself, we both actually left our careers in Dublin at the same time in 2006, and we moved back to Cork. So we both gave up everything. She had 3 very successful ballet schools, and I was still working. I suppose I didn't have too much to give up. It was a job in one of these multinationals, and I was going nowhere fast. I was literally just putting in time. But at that stage, I got to the point where it was actually making me, I guess, almost physically sick to put in the 9 to 5. You know, it wasn't even the job; it was more the having to sit for 40 hours a week, regardless of workload. You know, if I did my work in 2 days, I wasn't allowed to go home.
Yeah.
You know, might sound naive to say that, but to my mind, I'm like, why not? Which, you know, I was a very effective worker, and you know, I could do everything in 2 days. So why can't I leave? You know. But anyway, that was it. I got to that point, and we moved to Cork. We built a house in the countryside, and I guess since then we both have tried to, you know, finally put into practice everything we were trying to do. You know, we actually tried to make it a physical reality. And I guess obviously if I got married along the way, Orla was, you know, in step with a lot of my visions for the world, and thankfully, you know, thankfully for that, because, you know, that is fantastic to have that support. But I guess then from moving to Cork, a lot of this started to come from the internal to the external, where I started saying, well, okay, I have done this work on myself. You know, I kind of know what I want out of life. I know where I'm going, but how does that fit in with the wider community and the wider world outside? And you know, what if I find what I want to do, and that's great, but is that it? Does it impact other people? Do I need other people's support? And you can see where this is going. I suddenly started to realize that, well, hang on a minute, really, me being happy on my own is not necessarily just a good thing on its own either. Maybe everyone else is thinking like this too, but maybe they weren't forced into the journey you were, and maybe they would like to, you know, explore some of these options, and you know, maybe other people, while they may seem happy in their careers, maybe they don't want to be there, you know, and it set off a whole other chain of events. And I suppose throughout all this, there was a love of nature and a love of the land and walking and connection and, you know, place, sense of place. I guess most people from Ireland would have that, you know, that this immense love of the land and the, you know, the situation, the place where you live should be able to meet your needs. You know, I suppose the saying for me is from cradle to grave. You know, we should have security where we are from cradle to grave, you know, and a sense of purpose where we are, but ultimately security. And I looked around, and I suppose if I saw that nearly everybody didn't have that sense of security. Mm-hmm. And, you know, especially through those boom years, that then, you know, maybe that's why a lot of those people were trying to amass so much, maybe buying the 4 and 5 houses. And, you know, in nearly all cases, it was to get this mythical sense of security for the future, you know, that their society was very, very harsh and it didn't provide the security. So I suppose now we're getting to the point where an awful lot of strands were coming together, and suddenly I guess, I don't know, just literally a voice one day I heard, well, not I didn't hear a voice, but a strong sense in my head just said, you know, you're here to help build cities of gold. And that stuck with me as a metaphor then, because it was like, it's not cities of gold where we're all rich, it's cities of gold where everyone has that sense of security, where everyone has that sense of purpose. And no matter what age you are, you know that there is a place for you, and the future can be good, the future can be bright. Then that led me on to, okay, the book became something that I would have never thought I would have written a book. I just sat down one day, a contract, I guess since I moved to Cork, I've been working for myself as an engineer, and doing that, I was finally free of the clock, and you know, I kind of went from contract to contract, but there might be a few weeks lull in between those contracts, for example, and that's exactly what happened to me in the summer of 2009, where literally a contract ended and there was none on the horizon, and I just sat down one day and started writing. And I guess 4 or 5 weeks later, I had what was the the bare books or the bare bones of that book, and I tried to get it published then in Ireland, and obviously, as most people would know, that's a near impossibility to get a book published. So I found this amazing little new press in Maine in America called All Things That Matter Press.
Okay.
And I suppose a bit like you with your radio station here, it's very hard to break into, having a radio station, and but people are moving to the internet as a result.
Yeah.
It's a mobile world, and that's exactly what this company did. They husband and wife team. They set up a press basically from their own house. They had worked in the publishing industry, etc., and written books themselves, and they just started publishing people, and got all the deals going with Amazon and all of that. So they offered me that they would publish my book, and it was great, and they worked with me on editing it, and we put it together, and it was published in August 2010. Now, the book dealt with a lot of areas of how can we move from the world of scarcity and lack into one that does provide that nurturing security and I suppose almost spiritual abundance from cradle to grave, and everyone trying to find their place, and we allow those to find their places. So, for example, we don't just stick with mainstream education. We move into maybe head school type education, and we try to start bringing some of the community people together to talk to the children. And I made special mention of the teenage boy, that he is the one person in society who is particularly isolated, and well, we all know what happens then, that there is a particular epidemic of within that age group of getting isolated from society, from family, from friends, and where that leads to, so there was a lot woven into the book, and I guess the first part was a non-fiction where I did a lot of that. There's 17 chapters. I have it here in front of me, so I'll just call out a couple of the chapters real quick. What is a sustainable economy? What is sustainable education? The roles of men and women, losing our youth, which I just alluded to. Democracy, healthy body and mind, healthy land. Going into things like geopathic stress and all of that area. And then a kind of a philosophical discussion on things like, our concept of security and all of that. So that was the first part of the book. But then the second half is actually a fictional tale of one of Ireland's commuter housing estates, a place called Ballynatter that's just made up. It's about 60 miles from Dublin, but there's like 145 people living there or so. And, they were kind of left at the mercy of a developer, and, the housing estate is half unfinished, et cetera, which, resonates with so many people.
Absolutely,
and
familiar story.
They're driving vast distances to work, et cetera, and then I just kind of spark off that actually the main protagonist is kind of a 20-year-old guy who is on that path to being lost, but he kind of makes a connection with a retired man in the housing estate, and he kind of acts as a mentor to him, and they're, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go in life? And it suddenly ends up that his passion is actually the whole area of permaculture, and he goes and he works in that. And, it might be a bit far-fetched in the sense that, within a very short few years, they turn what they have, which is a dysfunctional housing estate, i.e. boxes where they sleep in a box, they get out of the box in the morning, get into another box, which is the car, drive to another box, which is a factory, go into another box, which is a cubicle. It turns that into, slowly over time, they're taking back their power, they're morphing, they're finding that they can do these solutions on themselves. They reject their local council because they won't finish the estate for them. They reject the developer, and they renamed their estate because it was Hill Valley Plains was the name of the estate. It's all coming back to me here, and I haven't read it for a year or two, but Hill Valley Plains, which is typical Celtic Tiger nonsense.
Absolutely.
They don't go together. Three vastly different words, so they turn it into the name that it is, because they look at the lie of the land and what is it, and they rename it that, and they have a renaming ceremony, and they start educating the children in the community. They start fighting back, well, we're not going to do 9 to 5. There's a woman in her 30s who refuses anymore to do this, and she she's the one who makes that huge jump for I suppose women of that generation, mid-30s, a couple of kids who really wish to work, but don't wish to work 40 to 60 hours a week, and commuting 1 or 2 hours either end of it. So she just flips that on the head and just goes right to the CEO of the company and says, I'm not doing this, I'm working at home, most of my work is digital anyway, I'll come in here 1 or 2 days a week, that's it, you're giving it to me, there's no question of precedent, etc., I'm taking it, I'm doing it, and she does it, and then that kicks off a chain reaction around the country, and then eventually the idea is that eventually we live in a world full of building cities of gold is the concept. But I wrote the book, I published the book, and very quickly I realized that I did not address the monetary question, and that's where we come into the video and the couple of years, I suppose, journey since the book to getting to the point of getting this video put together. And, that's the book in a nutshell. It left a very, very, very big question mark. That question mark possibly should have prompted another book, but I didn't feel a book was the right medium. I wanted to start speaking to people. I didn't really have I'm not really someone who would go out there and grab a microphone, so I kind of went maybe speaking to small groups of people, and then I met somebody who is an expert, and I would like to mention to him at the end as well, an expert in putting together videos and stuff, and he just took my story and we worked together for a couple of weeks, and that is the video. So, but there was a big journey in coming from the end of the book to the video to even meeting that guy, which was the journey around the monetary question, and we're all made to feel so I guess stupid for even questioning it, and that basically, how can we possibly sit in a media studio with a suited middle-aged man who has all that smugness and confidence of 30 years in those industries. And I didn't want to go into those situations because they do have that smugness and that confidence, and while you may be right, they have bluster on their side, and sometimes that does work, so I just kind of quietly went about sitting with the problem, I guess. This is money. What is money? Where does it come from? How is it coming? And where is it going? Who is doing it? What does this mean? How does this tie into our people, our demographics, our population, etc., etc.? So I guess that was the journey in a high level.
And a fascinating journey, and no doubt in the early days, of course, Barry, it would have been a lonely place, I would imagine, because for anybody listening who may have been on a similar journey, and I can relate to a lot of what you've spoken about there personally, it's not always the most welcoming world that you face when you realise that things aren't necessarily what you were brought up or conditioned to believe.
No, that's true, but that would have been the first 2 or 3 years where you kind of try to tell people maybe what you would see in the world back in the late 90s, and I quickly learned that wasn't a good idea. Yeah. Now, it's not a case of me repressing that side of me by any means. It just meant that it was a lonely place. It was a journey. But you know what? It's not. Ultimately, it's not, because more and more, I've actually realized that actually I am a person, I have a fantastic family. I have 3 small kids. But you know what? I actually am a person who really does crave solitude, and that was a nice thing to come out of it, that I do like to take off for a few hours in the mountains on my own walking, and so you know what? Yes, it is. It can be a lonely place, certainly, to kind of go on that journey. And when you feel you can't speak to people about the things you see, yes, but in no way do I feel a victim by that or anything, and not at all, actually. Now, especially for the reason that it's historical anyway, and secondly, I'm just seeing people everywhere now. Everywhere I go, people are just saying, this is not right, this is not right, the world is not right, the life as we know it is not right. So, they're still possibly not ready to delve into why, but they do know it's not right. So then I know, there is very, very few people who had that bravado and swagger from 6-7 years ago, where they thought they were invincible. And there's tremendous humanity in every in people. I mean, my daily job would actually be going to people's houses quite a lot, and I've probably been in 1,000 houses around County Cork and City in the past few years. And I have to say, there isn't one house that I was in, and believe me, I was in all social demographics. There wasn't one house that I was in, the same motif did not run through that family, and that is that they simply wanted themselves, their children, and their extended family to be happy, healthy and secure, and that was it. Nobody had any. Ultimately, that was it. Now, they might still be striving, and you might go, well, why are you striving so hard for, giving up so much of your time? But they're doing that for security. There's actually very, very few people. I truly believe that there's very, very few people who are really greedy, for example, that they may be on a path where it may not be the best for them, and that's not my place to say that, but perhaps they would come to that realization themselves. But in doing so, I think it's for very good motives ultimately, and those motives are security for my kids as they grow. I suppose if you watch my video, it's probably quite a challenge to a lot of people, because it's saying that, I'm sorry folks, there is no security in the system as it exists, nor will there ever be. And that is a hard pill to swallow, unfortunately. But if we do swallow that pill, we can very, very quickly move to a society that does work. And, I guess this is really my goal all along as we prepared this video. And by the way, I'm just going to mention Dan Southgate, who lives in Kinsale. He's got he's a guy who was very successful in graphic design in New York. He was a partner in a company, and he actually was, I believe, lead designer on many Nike ads, etc.
Right.
But he has come back to Ireland actually for I guess to work on it for himself as well. To ultimately, I suppose, get out of that rat race. But he has a graphic design site there called LEDAEAN, I think, ledan.com, Dan Southgate. But anyway, myself and Dan, when we were working on this video, for me the goal always was that it would push people closer to the choice point. And by that I mean we're being told daily that austerity is something that is a good and noble thing, because we are sacrificing temporary comforts for long-term security, and that it will be a good thing if we do that. And once again, we are doing the noble path that our ancestors did, etc., etc. Now, hopefully, through mathematics, I have proved, and not mathematics in a difficult sense, but through simple looking at numbers, that is actually hogwash, and therefore there is no good future on that path. So then, if you believe that, or if you see that video, for example, and you accept that, well, then you're left with two choice points, and those two choice points are. And this is what I wish we would all turn around to ourselves and to our families and our friends right now in this country, and by extension the world, and say, okay, we're at the choice point. These people believe we are stupid. They believe we're incapable of governing ourselves. They believe we're not capable of running financial models. They believe we're not capable of acting morally, that we need 10,000 statute laws, etc., etc. We know their austerity path is not going to work. So therefore, why go through a lost decade of depression, suicide, fear, anger, to ultimately get to the point where we are going anyway, which is just sign everything over, all public and private rights tomorrow. Let's just sign them over to the banking / superstate / statute legal law system. Let's just hand absolutely everything over today, tomorrow, whenever. If we need a month to make that decision, let's just do it en masse as a society, and then negotiate terms and conditions after that, because that is where we are going in a decade. Less than a decade.
And that's the thing. And just to backtrack a little bit, Barry, because you touched on, I suppose, the dilemma that so many people face, be it consciously or subconsciously, in making ends meet. And so many people that we speak to on this show talk about the same thing, and it's that daily struggle for security. And the problem with that is it's such a distraction then for people to be able to see the bigger picture, so that they don't necessarily see that in a decade's time or whatever length of time it may be, this is where we're headed, because they're focusing on literally the trees and not the wood or the bigger picture. And I suppose the big question for us is how to break free from it. And your book and your video, the beauty of them for me is that they actually go into practical solutions, because so many people can identify the problem, but because of their daily life and their situation, be it mortgages or paying the bills or whatever it might be, they can't really embrace what it is they feel, and they're trapped in this, I suppose, this headspace or this mentality when they should be following something else entirely. And your book and the video, they're one of the few things that manages to put things together in layman's terms, and it really is so accessible. Everybody should watch the video From Tyranny to Freedom, because it's so accessible, it makes perfect sense, and then spends so much time offering practical solutions, which, if people look at it, really will work. And I suppose the key thing for us to talk about is about those solutions, because we spend so much time identifying problems, and not many people come up with solutions. I have to say I've been very, very impressed by those in the video.
Good, thanks for that. Now, just before we move into that, if you don't mind, could I just finish that one point,
of course,
about the choice point, because that is very, very key to this. That you are 100% correct, that people just are literally bet down, is the term we use in Ireland. They're bet down, and they're just getting up, going through another day. They're hoping their state, they're hoping their banking model, they're hoping their legal system is going to ultimately get sane and come together, and we're going to grow our way out of this. That is not going to happen. So I really feel strongly about this choice point, that why go through that lost decade when we are getting to the point where they will take everything off us? Let's have that choice point. And you see, when I'm pushing that choice point on people, it's making it imminent. You have 1 month. Now, obviously, we don't have 1 month, but you have 1 month to decide whether you're handing everything over to this model and then negotiating for terms and conditions, or you're rejecting this model because this model can be rejected. That is the choice point, folks, because this is what they're using. They're using our compliance and our trust, our blind trust in the fact that human nature is good. You see, this is the point. I've been in 1,000 houses, and human nature is very, very good. We are a trusting species, and we do trust that these people are there for our good. Now, there are good people in this system, don't get me wrong, but the system is designed to take ownership of you and everything that you have. So force this choice point. Are you okay with that? If we all decide en masse that we're okay with that, well then maybe we should do it. Maybe we should hand everything over and negotiate for terms and conditions. It would be quite silly to do that, but maybe we should at least spark that question, or move into the solutions.
Okay, so on to the solutions, Barry, because they are many and varied, and I'm a big believer in there being infinite solutions for any one problem, as long as people actually understand what the problems are. And the video and the book really lay out what the problems are, and in quite a, I suppose, a sentient way, and it's very well put together and very simplistic. There's nobody who should be in any way, I suppose, intimidated by this knowledge, because it's very, very simple when it's laid out in layman's terms, as you've managed to do. And that, of course, then leads on to the solutions. So let's talk about some of your solutions. Okay,
and I'm glad you say my solutions, because if you put 1,000 people in a room for a month and said, analyze the financial, the legal and the state system, you will get 1,000 different ways in which it is wrong. So I am certainly not the expert on all of this. We all are the experts on it. And I have one particular slant that is my journey on it. And I suppose by watching the video, you will see that through number crunching, which is very simple, as you say, that basically I have tied it into population growth and population growth expansion rates, that based on the way money is issued into society, it is actually pre-programmed to blow up, and it blew up 4 years ago, and everything since is just literally life support machine. And so I suppose I was able to see that the financial model as it exists as it exists is dead. So therefore, what can we do? So then it becomes a question of, well, if the financial model is corrupt and is like this, well then why do we have to engage with this system? And then you look that the state and the legal system enforce this, and you know that they're seizing property for this system. They're throwing people out of their houses, and they're willing to hand up the infrastructure of countries like in Greece, and even in this country with the potential sale of the ESB, that there is a mass collusion going on between the state, the banking system and the legal system to actually turn a corrupt monetary system, which it is. I mean, if it was a casino, it would be shut down 100 years ago. To turn this rubbish, and that's what it is just rubbish, this monetary system, rubbish is a very, very kind term for what it is, to turn this monetary system into a means of extracting real physical assets from the people, their businesses, and from the land that they live on. Therefore, you say, well, if this is the case, how come when we have a democracy and vote in political parties, etc., that they don't do anything to change this? And then you realize that literally they are just a changing of the board of directors of a corporation, and the corporate model was set out in possibly a 100-year plan, and they're just steering it along, and that they will never change it. Now, I do come back to the human beings within that model and say, in many cases, they are good people who do not realize A, what the problem is, and B, even if they do realize that they can't do anything to change it, and that it's far easier to just keep extracting, keep squeezing, keep taking what is not possible to take to sate this model, and eventually a point is reached where the model will crash and everything is seized. Now, how do we reject it? Well, first of all, it has to be a consciousness awakening. It has to be a case that we first of all wake up to the problem. Now, everyone, you go into a room and there's 20 people in the room, and 20 of them will have a different villain. One is the public sector, one is the private sector. They have too many tax breaks, they can do their own taxes, they can write off expenses, etc. The other is, it's all the old people's fault. They give up work too early. They're looking for too much. They're trying to hold on to their fuel allowance, and we can't even put food on the table. Or it's the it's the immigrants' fault, or it's the kids' fault. They're demanding too much nowadays. We're constantly pitted against each other in that, and that is the daily discourse, that it's constant. And this is why I use the rats and the cat analogy. We're rats trapped in a barrel, and if you trap rats in a barrel, it's an ugly, ugly scene, and they all turn on each other. And we are turning on each other. We have for the last 4 or 5 years, and that I find particularly dispiriting because we're not looking at the real villain. We're not looking at the way we're controlled from outside the circle. And if we all just stopped for one day, and this is why it is a consciousness awakening, if we all stopped for just one day, stopped fighting and bickering and looked outside the circle, the system just falls. It just literally falls. And that sounds a bit, airy-fairy, but for example, me personally, I have turned off the white noise of that system a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So I refuse to engage with that system. I still am engaged. I would say I still am engaged with the system in terms of paying taxes and all of that. Because even though I know we can all renounce that, and I know in doing that doesn't make us anarchists, by the way. The society as it is anarchy. It's the pure definition of anarchy. But I still am engaged with the system. But that system, that fear-based system, that system of lack, has absolutely no power over me because I don't engage with it. I've literally turned off the white noise. And that is a goal of mine in this video, that first of all, we all need to turn off the white noise. No more fear from them. The world is infinitely abundant. We are all born sovereign. We are all eternal souls come here, with this wonderful experience to live a human life on this earth. It's a totally, absolutely abundant world. and it should be one of joy, happiness and peace and security and love and all those good things. It is not, but it could be very, very quickly if we turn off the white noise. And then if enough people turn off the white noise, it's like you're at a party and everyone looks into the corner and it's like, are you guys still there making that noise? Jumping up and down? Oh yeah, we moved on a long time ago. So it's not necessarily a move to the streets, because a move to the streets can be infiltrated and turn into a riot, and at that point, the martial law is declared, or the army sweeps in, or whatever. I mean, it's literally a consciousness. First of all, let's have that question of ourselves. Are we willing to hand over everything? I'm not. I don't think anyone else is. Well, then we move into the solutions. As soon as you move to the solutions page, the first thing that's presented to you, though, is how can we reject that system, And that is the first thing, is you consciously reject it, because it has no goodness in it. There is no goodness in it. It completely violates everything that's goodness. And I'd like just to refer, I got this from a website yesterday, and when we had arranged to do this interview. I found this and I found it fascinating. I think everyone would agree that marriage done correctly is a good thing. It's a sacred thing. It's something that's been done for forever, basically, and in many cases, obviously, it begets the next generation, and it is a good thing. I don't think anyone could say that marriage is not a good thing, but. According to the legal system as it stands, and their Bible is often the Black's Law Dictionary, a license is described as permission by competent authority to do an act which, without such permission, would be illegal. Now, illegal is their term for their legal system. Yeah. However, people have been getting married for however long people have been on the earth. So it's a natural law. It's a lawful thing to do, to get married. So basically what it's saying is, if you wish to do certain acts, you're committing an offence, i.e. you're a criminal, if you do not get a licence, which is permission, from competent authority, which is the government, before you engage in those acts. None of us wish to be criminals or break the law, so we blindly presume and assume that we must obtain a licence. So basically they're criminalising marriage. They're saying because it's illegal if you do not have one of their licenses to do it. So how can marriage, which begets the next generation of people in many cases, I'm not saying obviously in all cases, but it's something that two people, fall in love, get together, try to forge a life together, bring another generation into the world that perpetuates this wonderful experiment that is humanity, something that is so natural and in tune with the earth, with the universe, with everything that is good, be termed illegal. And that just proves how false the legal system actually is, that it is completely arbitrary. It is a corporation, and in all cases, all states, you see, we forget that all states in our world are very, very modern entities. There is none possibly older than 200 years. I mean, it's so the state of Ireland tells me that if I don't have one of their licenses, I cannot be married, and in fact it's illegal to be. But yet the land of Ireland, this beautiful sacred land that's been here forever and that has spawned so much of goodness and creativity in this world, has had people marrying for how many thousands of years. So that shows the utter nonsense that the statute system is, the statute legal system and the rules of the state. And we quickly start to realize that all of this is just a corporation, that when we continually vote in politicians, they are literally just what would you say, executives of a corporation. Exactly. And the longer we vote them in, the longer that perpetuates, and nothing can happen. And going back to the financial models, it's like, well, this particular organization said that if they went in, they would cut taxes. No, they haven't. They haven't because they can't, because the system is designed that they're just a corporate entity. They have to squeeze the people for all the resources that they have, because that is the way the system is designed. And the monetary system is designed in such a way that taxation can only go one way, inflation or prices can only go one way, which is up. And you just have to keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, which is the rats in this barrel analogy, that the fattest rat is the state. The private sector, self-employed, which is me, are the rats on the edge. And as you go in along the the layers, you're reaching the more and more secure parts of that society. And then, there are many, many people out there who would feel very safe, let's just say millionaires or even very well-paid executives in the public sector, and I'm not now talking about the mid-level, guards or nurses or anything like that in the public sector. I'm talking about the very well-paid executives within the public sector, and let's just say the very wealthy people within the private sector.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of them just wish all this noise of depression and recession, etc., would go away, because, they probably feel guilty for, being in the position they're in, and they can't go on holidays because their neighbors will, etc., etc. And I'm sure they would just wish it would all go away, and that, everyone went back to kind of being happy, and, let's just get on with it. But, they are not safe, because as those outer layers of the rats in a circle start getting picked off, like, as we said, the private sector, self-employed, and then the companies in the private sector, and then the etc., the fuel allowance from old people, and the job seekers allowance goes because you haven't done X, Y, and Z conditions that are more and more difficult to fulfill.
Yeah.
That eventually the rat will get in there, and that millionaire will suddenly find a 95% wealth tax slapped on him. And he can do nothing. That is it. He can do nothing. They can do that because the state is a corporation, and he is accepting the terms and conditions of the corporation. And as long as he does that, they can do what they want. And there's one particular journalist, and I'm sticking with the vein of not using any names, because for the sole reason that I firmly believe we cannot. It is time to stop looking at other people. We look at within ourselves, and then we look up at who is controlling us. But there is one particular journalist who was particularly vehement against a legal case going on at the moment, and telling me by virtue of the fact that I read his article that I should hate a particular individual. Now, I just kind of thought to myself afterwards, and of course I did write a letter back which wasn't published, but anyway, I said, what is that man's breaking point? He is so strongly defending the system as it exists, and I was really intrigued to know what his breaking point is. And I said, like, is it when his probably relatively modest house in wherever he lives has a 10,000 a year property tax? Is that his breaking point? Is it when the state puts 90% income tax on him? Is it when, because he hasn't paid his taxes, the state take his kids into care because he hasn't paid his taxes? And that sounds crazy, but look.
Well, it does sound crazy, Barry. But you look down through history, and so many things that people thought at the time sounded crazy turned out to actually happen. And I suppose it's one of the lessons that we can learn from history, is that no matter how crazy something seems, quite often it's what comes to pass, and particularly if there is form in the past. And when you're talking about a corporation or a state, as you are, it's not a person, so it doesn't think in the way that we think. So we think that's crazy, of course, because it totally flies in the face of everything as human beings that we believe in and we feel. However, a corporation doesn't feel or think the way we think. It's an entity, it's a machine, and it doesn't have emotion.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's it exactly, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, that is a reality, that, okay, you can have your children back when you pay us taxes. Why not? I mean, they as long as we comply by the rules of the state, which is when you're born, you get a birth certificate, you literally can't leave the hospital. I mean, we have a 7-month-old, our third child, and so that's quite recent for me, that you literally cannot leave the hospital until he gets his name in full capitals. And I don't know, my video was initially an hour, but it's very difficult to get someone to watch something for an hour. So there was a lot of finer detail cut down from it, and I couldn't go into the whole area of that capitalized name, but it actually is a Roman term, and it means it's called capitis diminutia maxima, and it basically means, because there are other forms of capitis diminutia, I think minima is another one, and there's a media as well, maybe in the middle. And basically capitis diminutia maxima means you have been assigned maximum slavehood, that you are the ultimate slave. So your child, as they leave the hospital, is no longer a human being in the state's mind. They are actually a slave, a future slave, and that is you willingly, because you need the money, take the children's allowance. But I mean, that of course is the trap to make sure that he does become that future slave, and he is actually owned by the corporation at that point. Now, you cannot own a flesh and blood person. A corporation is just that, is a corporation. No parent would willingly hand their child over to a corporation, but unfortunately that is what happens when they get this birth certificate, which enables the child benefit, which enables the future taxpayer, etc., which now makes you liable for every and all rules of the state. And as I say, as the monetary model squeezes, the state can then implement whatever it is they wish on that person. Mm-hmm. But of course they can't if that person wakes up to the fact that there is this ghost version of themselves called their corporate identity, and that their corporate identity is literally dragging them over a cliff. But all it takes is you're shackled to this corporate version of yourself. You're on the edge of the cliffs of Moher, if we could just imagine that. And this guy's got, there's manacles on you and between on your wrists, and he's falling over the edge. And down there, there's sharks, and there's servitude, and there's penury, and there's lack, and there's stagnation, and there's suicide, and there's depression, but to the left in the fields of County Clare, there's abundance, there's security, there's humanity, there's love, there's peace, there's happiness, there's everything good, and there's the flesh and blood person standing there. And this is the choice point. Do we let this corporate version of us pull us over, or do we take the axe from the ground and set him free? And that is literally, that is what I'm trying to get to people into. I'm trying to force people into the choice point.
And for anybody who might like to look into that in a little bit more depth, or who are shouting at the radios thinking, what are you talking about, two people? That makes no sense. There's a very good 5-minute video on YouTube by a crowd called Informatic Films called Meet Your Straw Man, which of course is another layman's term for the corporate identity or the legal fiction you're talking about. So I'd highly recommend that to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke at the start of this interview about the journey, and for me, I suppose 15 years now, kind of questioning myself, society, my role in it. Why am I here? What is the purpose of it all? Yeah. And I had said for the first 10 years that's very much an internal journey, and I think many people would agree that. But a lot of those people in the last 4 or 5 years have started to externalize that and trying to integrate it into society. And like 5 years ago, I would have said you were mad. Yeah. 3 years ago, when I wrote my book, I would have said you were mad with all that stuff. I just didn't get it. It was a staged process that eventually, I knew the monetary system was corrupt, and I knew the state. I just thought the state was incompetent. I didn't think it was actually corrupt. Yeah. And I think most people would think that. I think they would think, no, those guys are just, they've never worked in a real job. They're just, all they do is go to committee meetings, that they don't know what it is to run a successful business, or, do a decent day's work on a building site or whatever, But no, it is actually, the system is designed, it is corrupt. It is designed in such a way that there is a collusion between that system, between the legal system and between the monetary system, to take ownership of you. And that is a hard pill to swallow, and like that's why I am very conscious of the fact that like I would be considered a very sane person and a very, I guess, conservative person in many ways, that I barely drink, don't smoke, married with 3 children, and very, very conventional looking person, and very, when I do my 9 to, well, I call it 9 to 5 work, when I do the work that brings in income, very professional and competent in doing that, and people wouldn't know anything, that I would have these beliefs or visions, but for a better future. But I really do sympathize with somebody who has given their life, their career, to working in this system. And I'm thinking especially here of, maybe a retired public sector worker, maybe a retired guard or teacher, or, and they're dependent now on a good pension from the state. And they may be very, very resistant to that state model changing because they're afraid their money will stop coming. And if I could give any reassurance, it would be, don't be afraid of that, because once this systemic inflation is gone, once this obsessive or tyrannical pursuit of your property and money goes, that actually things will cost far less, and B, when we start building the infrastructure that actually provides a lot of these things, you're going to find yourself much more secure than you ever would with a pension from the state. But I really, really do sympathise for somebody who I feel very privileged to only be 38 and that we're at this juncture. I would really be disillusioned if I was 68 or 78, having given a whole life and belief system to this. And I really do sympathise with those people on how they can take in this information. I don't know, maybe.
Well, you see, I think it's down to the individual with that, and it's just my personal opinion, but as somebody who came across a lot of this information quite early and was open to it at an early stage, I've often thought the same thing, because I would see the struggle maybe when I debate this with members of my family or extended family or friends or people who are a little bit older than me. And they seem a lot more resistant than, say, my peer group or people who are slightly younger than me. And I think that's purely down to the level of conditioning, and that's not to demean anybody, but we are in a society that conditions us to think in a certain way, and it's a big move to kind of break free of those chains of conformity, and it's, I would imagine, more and more difficult as time goes on for people. But I do think that the information is so empowering that whether somebody is 16 or 60, it is possible to embrace the knowledge and to actually work for a better future for everybody, because I think something like this can have a snowball effect, and if there are tangible results from a proposed solution and that they become obvious to people, there's nobody going to be left behind who will want the original system, because it will be shown up as being so flawed as time goes on. People will just reject it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're correct. And when I say that, I suppose I'm talking about the initial shockwave that hits society when they realise the extent of the control and manipulation that is not just this generation, but is multi-generational, and I suppose the repressed and suppressed history that then has to come out as a part of that there will be an initial shockwave. And it is the same fear of I suppose, we actually haven't spoken about the physical things that can happen as solutions, but maybe it's better if people just watch the video, because we're kind of having a discussion more so about the I suppose the philosophical notion of change, of this change. But if people would be terrified to go through the change, which is the fall of that system and the introduction of the new. And that is where we have to come together, in the sense that there may be shortfalls, there may be a situation where the infrastructure falls down here and there, but you know what, we're not going to perish in that, and certainly a lot of older people would possibly be very, very, even though they know this system is not in their favor, they're just terrified of the notion of even having 1 week where there is a shortfall in their usual routines and I suppose incomes, etc. But unfortunately, the alternative is far worse. And in cases like that, I suppose I would kind of ask them to think of their grandchildren. The retired public sector person who does not want this change, refuses to go through it, is fighting it, will really, really find it difficult to even begin to look at this information. I would say, okay, that is fine, I understand that, and I completely 100% sympathise with you, because you know what, I probably would be in the same position if I was at your stage in life. But do you really wish your grandchild to continue living in this system now that you know this information? Because you're fine, you're at the end of your life, but they're only starting their life, and literally within 10 years they are going to be negotiating for terms and conditions, and I wouldn't fancy negotiating with these people for terms and conditions.
Well, no, because to go back to your rat in a barrel analogy, there is, of course, as is nicely shown in the video, there's the elephant in the room, and that's the cat sitting outside that barrel waiting for the final fat rat. Yeah, exactly, and that is the control system. It's I suppose in the video it's just particularly about central banking, the banking model itself. But I guess really that cat can be the unholy trinity of the corporate state model, the legal system within the corporate state model, and the banking
they are an unholy trinity that is controlling society. And the irony, I mean, there's so much irony. You know, the fat rat of the state thinks that, you know, they can eventually sort everything out, and you know, the state itself will be consumed. And then you say to yourself, well, those guys outside the bar who are actually doing this, that unholy trinity, you know, why? Because eventually the whole thing is just going to crash, and there's a completely Gotham City reality. And what is the benefit of that for anybody? You know, I mean, it just makes no sense. It's a pursuit for consumption of everything good. But what then? You know, I mean, whereas you know, the society model that the likes which you know, me as one person, and I certainly don't have even believe that the ideas I put forward are probably a tiny percentage of the other ideas that would come to fruition from people. You know, things like a barter economy that would work, you know, releasing free energy technology for the masses and making it part of a compensation package, building local permaculture models. In fact, I have another piece of information here just as I do that. There's a guy called Will Allen in Growing Power, Wisconsin, and he can produce 450 tons of food in 3 acres per year. He uses 300 to 500 yards of worm compost. He utilizes vertical space for growing, 3 acres of land in greenhouses. He uses just one simple aquaponic pump. Food is grown all year by using heat from the compost piles, and he's making $200,000 per acre. So 3 acres of land can give us 450 tons of food. You know, another study I read that, you know, the roof space in New York alone can feed 15 million people. Now, 15 million people must be the population of New York. So the roof spaces of the buildings in New York can feed the population of New York. So then you realize this utter nonsense that we're listening to about we can't sustain the world's population is exactly that. It is just utter nonsense. We produce currently food for 10 billion people. There's only 7 billion of us, and yet 1 billion are hungry. Yeah. So then you see that it's not the earth that cannot provide. It is the monetary model that cannot provide. And I would go back one further thing. In the video, I talk about a couple, John and Jane, and they take out a mortgage, and it's for $250,000, and you know, over the 30-year life of that mortgage, it becomes 500,000, and you know, as you watch the video, you realize that interest that they have to pay doesn't exist in society. And I say they have to work extra hard to try and obtain it. Now that may be confusing for people because I've just said it doesn't exist. So they have to work extra hard to try and obtain it. I mean, well, if it doesn't exist, how do they obtain it? By that I mean that they're lucky, they're educated, they're both in, you know, corporate jobs, let's just say, and their education and their qualifications in the job they have ensures that they're paid a healthy remuneration between them, and that remuneration contains the interest that they have to pay back. But because the interest that they owe doesn't exist, they're actually taking money out of circulation that those who aren't as well served as them, i.e. through education and having a good job, etc., can't find them, or they're taking that money that those people would use. And then you quickly step down the ladder and you see that is actually what creates the strict tiered hierarchical society that we have. That it's, you know, and this is the strive then on education. This is why we push our children to be so bloody educated and 600 points in university and career, and it's just a never-ending circle that you hope that they end up somewhere high enough on the food chain that they can source the interest to pay their debts. But as they do it, they're creating the layers underneath them when you come right down to the fact then that in Africa the people can't eat food. So we're producing food for 10 billion people. There's 7 billion on the planet, 1 billion of which are going hungry, and you realize that by us, I guess let's call ourselves middle-class people because we live in the Western world, that middle-class people in the Western world, as they service the debt, unfortunately we're actually causing starvation elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of horror story that we have to face up to. And then when you say that, then you say, do I have any moral choice anymore but to reject the model? You know, I'm now getting to the point where I'm actually, when you tell people this information and they see this information, you know, is it now morally okay to continue to actually be part of this model. Now, the irony and for me and all that is I still haven't rejected this model, because I'm firmly of the belief that I do not. I want us all to do it, or I don't want us, or I either want us to not do it en masse, or I want us to do it en masse. My goal is to give the information to make this choice, and this is the point. We're all at. I want us to realise that we're all at the cliffs of Moher. We're all manacled to this guy. They're pulling us over the edge. We can set them free in one swift motion, and then let's get busy. All those sane, honest, decent people, of which it's 99.99999% of us, can get to work at building a society that works. And you know what? All those people who are working in the existing system, like the politicians, etc., who are good people, and there are many, can come and work in that new system. Why not? You know, I'm sure they have skills that we can use. But those who are actively working within that system to bring us down, unfortunately, no, you're not welcome to the party. And in fact, that is where we have to realise that the new legal system, which would be a common law system, would have to deal with those who who actively pursued this model. But there's no point in us, and that's why I've refused to name any names or organisations or government parties or, it's wasted energy. It's rats fighting each other within the circle. And that's how you lose. The more you fight, the more you blame this politician, that politician, this company, that sector of society, the more you lose, the more you lose, the more you lose, the more they win, they being those who are running the game. So there will be plenty of time for a proper legal system to address the crimes of those who knew what they were doing and actively pursued that. And there are many, many, many thousands, tens of thousands of innocent people working within that system who are just trying to get by as well, so...
Well, I agree with everything you said, Barry, and I think one of the first steps for me, and it was an empowering one, and one that caused consternation within, I suppose, within my family. I come from a very political family who are very active at high-level politics in Ireland, and it was a path that I had considered through school and college and that kind of thing that I would eventually go down. However, I made the conscious decision a number of years ago to deregister, not to vote anymore. And this is as somebody who thought that it should be mandatory to vote and that it was everybody's civic duty and responsibility to do so. And the reason I decided not to vote, and I know there are probably people thinking, what kind of a nutcase are you? Of course we have to vote, it's your duty. However, you talked about the distraction of politics and the infighting and this, that and the other. And that's all it is. I mean, as long as we vote, we're validating a system that personally I don't believe in and that I have rejected. So it would be hypocritical of me to do that. And for those that say, well, if you don't vote, you've no right to give out about the system that exists, I would say it's actually the opposite. Because if you're validating a system, well, then don't complain about it. Whereas if you choose to actively step outside that system, well, then of course, as long as you're offering solutions and you're, I suppose, doing something about it yourself, well, then of course you have the right to rail against it in a sense.
Absolutely, and it's so funny, we all realise things at various stages, and would you believe what you've just said? I realised just yesterday, and it was from speaking to a friend of mine, Tom Ryan in Dublin, and he said that exact thing. What you've just said to me, he said it. Now, I was completely the opposite. I came not from a very political family, and then through my 20s, I didn't vote. And then when I moved to Cork 6 years ago, I started voting, thinking that it was the right thing to do, exactly as you just said, that it's the right thing to do, and, I can't complain if I... And then just what you've said, my friend Tom said it to me yesterday, and I went, oh my God, that's so right. Wow. That, I consciously, I suppose energetically, have rejected that system, and therefore the fear and the false bluster and bravado and just the jumping up and down and screaming like a child tantrum that system perpetrates on the people, I have disengaged from it. But, like, for example, I would have still voted in the upcoming referendum, and now I won't. I choose not to, and for that very reason, that it is. But I suppose we all come at it from different angles, and I suppose my goal was to let people see the system as it stands, and then to, I suppose even I have rejected the system energetically, therefore it had no power over me, and it was just easy to keep, keep paying my taxes, etc. Because I don't want to bring the grief on me that screaming child would try and, intimidate with me with court cases, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go through that grief on my own individually as I was trying to get this information out, because it would be too much of a distraction. Now that this information is out and other people, I want us to make this decision. Are we falling off the cliffs? Or are we going to change it? Are we going to reject their system and bring in a system that works? And there's probably 1 or 2% of people, I think I said this to you yesterday, who see through the veil and see that it's all BS. And then there are those 30% on the other end, and I think I mentioned some of them, and I completely understand where they're coming from, like the public sector retiree, etc., who's very, very worried about their pension, etc., and they will not change until the change is forced upon them, unfortunately. But then there is the 70% in the middle, those who are utterly desperate and feel that, how long can they sustain this? How long can they? And I'm not even talking financially here. Financially is just one part of it, but just in the way that the system dehumanizes them and just treats them like little kids, and how long can they put up with all this? But there is no alternative. That it's that 70% of people who are going to make the change. I've been 15 years questioning it. I don't know how long your particular journey has been, but there are a lot of people who have been on this journey for that long. We are not going to affect the change. I think we are bringing information to people from that 15-year journey. It's that middle core of people. It's that middle Ireland, let's call them, and the middle France and the middle Belgium and the middle America. They are the ones who are going to get us to the critical mass. And that is why I wanted this visual video to go to these people, to force them to that choice point of, the longer I keep on the treadmill, the more these rules and regulations are going to completely dehumanize me, strip everything of value for me. I mean, according to them, they are basically turning one of the most sacred things, which is marriage, into a dirty act, because it is a dirty act if you don't have one of their licenses. How can they say that? And this is the irony. I found another piece of information about a guy called Jeffrey Thomas Mayer, Maehr, and he has spent 10 years researching tax laws in America. And you see, because the statute legal system is a copy of natural or good law, it makes sense that those who wrote those laws would make human mistakes in making those statute laws.
Yeah.
So they haven't covered all their bases. And that is the irony that, for example, he is now on his 10th court case. And of course, they keep throwing them out because they know he's right. But under their, again, referring to Black's Law Dictionary, he has proven that income tax is not actually allowed to be levied, because income tax, according to Black's Law Dictionary, and remember now, this is the human error that an agent of state at some point made in transcribing natural or man-made laws into corporate laws. He calls it a tax on the yearly profits arising from property, professions, trades and offices. Now, straight away you would go, well, okay, professions, yeah, I have to pay a tax on my profession. But Mr. Mayer, Jeffrey Thomas Mayer, argues that wages are not profits. They're simply the result of an exchange of labour for money, pointing out that businesses routinely pay taxes on profits. He notes taxes are not expensed on the expenses of the business, and simply the labour of an individual is the expense required to obtain the money, so it's not profit. To determine otherwise would be to subject corporations such as Walmart to income taxes on 100% of their cash register receipts, he argues. And then he has 4 cases that back up exactly what he says, 4 historical statute law cases where judges at various points in 1946, 1969, 1883 agreed exactly with what he said. And I'll just call one of them out. 1946 case says, reasonable compensation for labour or services rendered is not profit. So this is the point. When you try and make a copy of law that is natural, in balance, that keeps man in check with himself, keeps man in check with his fellow man, keeps man in check with the earth, which common law does. And it doesn't lead to anarchy when we reject statute law, by the way. It actually does the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But when you try to make a copy of something natural as a human, you make a hames of it, you make a hash of it. And as they wrote Black's Law Dictionary, they made a hash of it. You know, the human error, the arrogance, whatever comes out in it, that they didn't even define income tax correctly, that we don't have to pay income tax. Now, according to them, then the only tax they're liable to levy on people is actually income tax from profits, which is only money that rises in value in a bank account, or if you realize a profit through a sale of an asset. So capital gains tax, therefore, is the only tax that can be levied. No income tax can be levied. So, you know, I mean, this is the sort of stuff that, you know, even if we were to continue on their rules, people are finding more and more ways that their system is totally incompetent. So there is, you know, and the irony I find is the politician who says, you know, on the radio station, you know, people are not paying their property taxes. Do they not realize it is the law of the land? And that, yeah. For my kind of situation, when he or she says that, it is actually ignorance, that they do not even know what they're saying. Because the law of the land, Ireland, the state, is not the land. Ireland, the land, has been here forever. The state has been here less than 100 years. So it is not the law of the land. And but then I get back to the question, and it's funny that you mentioned you come from a political family, you know, and I wouldn't cast any aspersions on those people in your family, but the political circuit starts at a very young age, and I'm sure you would agree that if you were to go down that route, it starts as a teenager if you come from a political family. And
absolutely, you go to I can remember canvassing on the doorsteps, age 11 and 12, you know.
Yeah, there you go. And so you start at that age, and you go to the weekly meetings, and you go to the, you know, the X party meeting and the Y party meeting, and you earn your stripes and you come up through the ranks. And then, you know, eventually you might be elected as a local politician, and then, you know, keep going to these meetings, keep on the circuit, keep on going, and eventually you might get to the holy grail of a ministerial role. Now, where is the time in that journey? Because all that journey is about getting recognition for who you are to get you elected into. Where is the time and the space for reflection on what your beliefs are? There is none. It's just one constant treadmill. So even our politicians, there is no place where it's built in that they reflect on the decisions that they're going to make in the future. I've spent 15 years thinking about things. That doesn't make me special in any way. I'm not saying that, but it's got me to the point where I'm able to have this conversation with you, and it's 15 years of solitude to get to that point.
Yeah.
You know, if you compare a politician of the same age, he's been 15 years listening to, you know, that noise. You know, so where has he grown to make decisions about, you know, where will he find the empathy to make decisions about cutting, you know, respite hours for, you know, handicapped children, or, you know, how there is no time, there is no space for reflection. Therefore, he or she, you know, I don't think can do the job that they're supposed to be doing.
Well, I agree, and not only that, they're prevented from doing so even if they wish to do so. And the party whip system, which exists here in Ireland, which is mirrored in political systems all over the world, basically whereby people have to toe the party line when it comes to a vote, so that that ensures that people don't vote depending, when it comes to a parliamentary vote, they don't vote depending on what it is that they believe themselves. They vote depending on what the party tells them to do, which keeps governments in power and makes sure that all these statutes and acts and laws, as people sometimes are usually call them, actually do pass. And that in itself says so much about the political system and what's wrong with it.
Absolutely. I mean, how do we think it's okay that the person who, you know, is supposed to represent us, and 3 or 4 of them per constituency, is not allowed to use his voice? that means we're not allowed to use our voice.
Exactly.
That's what they're saying. If he can't use his voice and say, and at what point was it decided that a party losing a vote in the Dáil meant a general election straight away? I mean, it's just insane. The whole thing is insane. If it was a true democracy in that sense, it would be 166 individuals working for the betterment of us all. And, I suppose just maybe to kind of clarify that, in moving to these new systems, and we haven't kind of got onto them, and that's fine with me, that, people would say, well, does that mean, maybe after watching the videos, does that mean there is no more state? And that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that the state has to finally serve the people. Therefore, after we build in these infrastructure upgrades and apply common law justice to those who were actively doing this, and, reverse the asset stealing that's been going on for centuries, etc., that there is, of course, a state after that, because we do need international relations, etc. But the community rises in power, and the community decides so much of what happens for that community. We have democracy in our own lives first and foremost, and we have democracy within our families, and then we have democracy in our communities. And if you have democracy in your communities, of course, you still have arguments and you still have personalities and egos, etc., but you have democracy. So people are competent to run their lives, and they can do so much at a local level. But then the state automatically falls and the statute law system falls. But we still, of course, need a state. We still need people who manage national affairs and international affairs. And there was a chapter in my book that dealt with this specifically, that we have a delegation of people who would be our chamber, let's say, and that delegation of people deals with delegations from other countries. And ultimately what it is a delegation that comes up with 20-year and 50-year and 100-year plans for humanity. I mean, who would have thought such a crazy thing? Like, what is humanity's goal for the next 20 years? Yeah. That is true democracy, nation to nation. It's not, how come we screw your country and, how can we screw that country? And, it is pure democracy, the voices of the people of the world coming together through chambers. But those chambers are literally dealing with the very high-end stuff of nation-to-nation compliance, or nation-to-nation relations, worldwide growth, worldwide security, worldwide peace, etc. And the people in their communities are running their communities because they are able to do it.
And that's what it should all be about, really. I mean, an holistic approach such as that is in keeping and in tune and in harmony with humanity itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Barry, I must say I really am very impressed by the video. I think it's essential viewing for anybody. You'll find it very easily on YouTube. From Tyranny to Freedom, it's called. We'll also put the link up on the website. The book is Building Cities of Gold. What's next for you, Barry Fitzgerald?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I believe we're on the brink of a fantastic future. I don't believe we're going to go over that cliff. If I could say anything to anyone, especially anyone who is in serious despair or even having suicidal thoughts or whatever, because of this system, because of the way they are being beaten down, is to just reach out to other people, grab a lifeline. Do not feel this on your own, because we are very, very close to this whole system falling, and really it is the middle section of people who are going to do it. And okay, you asked me what's for my future. I'm going to be busy, because I'm going to be along with the rest of us, sane, honest, decent people are going to be rebuilding the world. So we're all going to be busy, John. I just don't know what I'm doing yet.
Well, the future is bright. I have the power, you have the power, we have the power. Barry Fitzgerald, it's been great speaking to you today. Thanks for joining me on Alchemy Radio.
No problem, John. It was a pleasure.
Alchemy Radio.
Alchemy Radio.